All right, hello everyone. My name is Mildred, and in this lesson, we are going to look at how to correct our generated error from the last lesson. We tried in the last lesson to build and configure our EC2 instance, and so I'll just go to my EC2 and I will look at my instances. So I still have my instance running, and my instance is the class project. I want to connect to this from my command line. I'll just copy this code and I will connect. So I'll go to my terminal. I want to CD into my desktop. And the reason I did this, I explained in the last lesson that my PEM file are on my desktop and I don't want to have long directory names. So I just CD into my desktop. And then I will do this. And if all is well, it should connect successfully, and we are successfully logged into the server. Now, in the last lesson, we looked at the configuration of our server. We created a virtual host file, and let's go to that file. We say sudo etc/apache2/sites available/flags.com. Okay, so we configured this and we wanted to generate an error so that we can see where to get the error log files. Let me try to start this up. Let's recall the error that we created in the last lesson. So I want to go to my public IPv4 address, and I want to make sure that this is not HTTPS so that I can see it, and I should see internal server error when I get here. So we generated this error and we went to the log file to see that it is because we are not seeing the modules that have been installed. So how do we correct this error? Let me go back to the error log file so that you can see the error that was created. So let's say the error log file is in the var log, I think in the Apache2 folder, and then the name is, I think it's flags_error.log with configured. Okay, now we have this error file and we see module not found error is what we are experiencing. I want to go back to my configuration file. Module is not found, which means that something like our environment file is not being read, or we are not pointing to the correct Python path. Now what I did was to use Python name here instead of Python path so that we can have that error and we'll be able to look at the error log. So I'll change this from home to path, and I hope this should be the correction to that error. I will save, yes, and then let me restart. And then let us go back to our page and refresh, and we want to see hello world on the page. And yes, so that was the error we generated, and our app is working just fine. So we have successfully configured the server and created an app on the server. But what we want to do is to be able to clone our project from GitHub here, which means we have to create a repository, and then we have to add SSH keys on this server and add that key to the GitHub repository. Okay, so let us try to do that. So the first thing I'll do here is to, let me go back to my terminal. I will start my Visual Studio Code, and let me add project folder. I want to make sure I'm on the correct folder. We have these maternity records here. Okay, so we have the project open here, and what I want to do is to initialize this as a Git repository because I want to send this to GitHub. So before I do this, I'll go to github.com and I want to create a new repository. For those of you coming from course 1, we have done this previously where we create the repository and then we clone, then we push the project to the repository, and then we clone this repository to any directory of our choice. But in this class, we are going to clone this repository to our server. Okay, So I want to create a new repository here, and I'll name this repository maternity records. All right, I'll leave it as a public repository. I won't add a README file. I won't add the gitignore file. I'll just create repository. Now, I want to use this command line to send my project from my system to this repository. The first thing I want to do is to initialize this repository as a Git repository. So I'll say Git init. Now this is now a Git repository. I want to send this file to GitHub, and I don't want to have sensitive information on GitHub. So what I will do is, for us not to have sensitive information, we want to have a gitignore file, and I'll create this file here, and the name of the file is .gitignore. Now on this gitignore file, we want to put the files that we don't want to send to GitHub. So we want to keep this .env file on our system, so it's in the same directory. I'll say I want to ignore this file. I don't want these PyCache files to go to GitHub. Also, I'll put PyCache, and I also don't want all these Apple files, dstore. I think I don't have any of them, but normally I usually get those files. So let's put system files like .dstore, and I don't want my environment, virtual environment to go also. So I'll say .venv. I don't want this one to go also. So let's say these are the files we want to ignore. So whatever you put in your gitignore file is not going to be sent to GitHub. Because I have all of these files in these projects that have not been sent to GitHub and are just initialized for the first time, I don't want to add all. I want to first of all send the gitignore file to GitHub, and then I'll come back and send the rest to GitHub. So we've initialized this. If you follow the code that we have here, we can just say git add gitignore. So .gitignore. Then let's say git commit, and let's put like first commit. And now let's say git push. Before we push, we have to create the branch. So we want to say git branch main, and we want to add that. So let's say git remote. I'll just copy this to make it faster. And then let's say git push origin main. So some ref failed, push some ref, it failed. So there is something wrong with this. So we've added the main branch, and we want to add git remote. Let me type it, git remote add origin git at github.com. So my remote spelling is wrong. Okay, the remote origin already exists, and so we'll clear and we'll push git push origin main. Source ref spec does not match, main does not match any. So let's see whether we didn't add that. So let's say git branch main. We have that already. Okay, so when we want to push, we'll use the U flag. So say git push. You can just copy the code from here if you want. Origin main. We still have the same problem. Let's start again. Git init is already reinitialized, and then we'll say git status. So we have git commit, Let's commit. And now we'll say git push origin main. Okay, so we've pushed this to GitHub, and when I refresh this, I should have that git ignore file here in this maternity records project. Now we want to push all the other stuff here. So I'll clear, and I want to look at all the files that I have. So we have this .vs code. We don't want it also. Let me add it to this. I don't want this to be pushed along with my file. Okay, so we've added all of the directories that we don't want to push along with our code to GitHub, because these are files that we want to remain on our system. The .env file has the sensitive information. We don't want this information on GitHub. Our environment file, we also don't want it on GitHub, so we are going to create our new environment whenever we clone on our production server. Okay, so now that we've done this, let me just add everything. So git add. Most of the time I like adding the git ignore file first when I make any changes on it before I push the others. Okay, so now I'm going to add all. First project commit, and now we'll say git push origin main. When I refresh this, we should see all of our files are now here on the page. Does anyone have any question before we go further? Okay, so we have all of this here, and the next thing we want to do now is to generate SSH keys on our server. So we have successfully logged into the server here. We want to generate SSH keys on our server so that we can add this key to GitHub, and so we can clone this project on our server. So we looked at the directory where we want our projects, and we said it was the ops directory that we used in the last lesson, and we created the project called Flax app. We want to clone our project into this directory, and before we do that, we want to have our SSH keys. So I will generate this on the server, SSH keygen, and I think it's TRSA, and then C. I'll put my email address. I think this is it, and I want it to be IDRSA. I can put a passphrase, and then we have it saved in this directory. I want to copy the key, so I'll say cut, and then I'll copy that key, and I will go to GitHub, go to my avatar here, select settings, come to SSH and GPG, new key, let's say class project WS. Let's put the name and add key. Once this key is added, we want to see if it is connected to GitHub, and so we want to run the SSH git at github.com. So we should see this success message: you have successfully authenticated, but GitHub does not provide shared access. Once you see that, it means that you have successfully authenticated. There's an error I will want to generate for us to see, because these are the kind of errors you will have. When we try to clone our project here, I want us to have a public key denied, even though we can see this success message. I hope I'll be able to generate that. Let's say I want to, let's just restart. And I want to clone the project in this directory. So make sure you're in the ops directory. So I'll say git clone, and I'll come to this in GitHub, and let me get the repository. And the repository we just created is maternity records, and I want to clone this with SSH. So I'll now say git clone, and I will paste that here. So permission denied. Good. So this is what I wanted to get. We have permission denied, and one of the reasons we have this is we can decide to just change ownership of the directory to be the user to remove this error, permission denied error. So let me do sudo change owner, and I will use my username is Ubuntu. And I want it to be the owner of this directory opt. And I'll restart. And let me clone again and see. And now we are cloning successfully. Okay, when we list here, we can see we have the maternity records project cloned here. So now that we have this project clone, the next thing we want to do here now is to create our environment file so that we can have our environment variables here. So let's cd into the maternity records. And then when we list, we will see we don't have the environment file here. We want to create .env file. So let's create sudo nano.env. So we say when we use nano, it will create a file if the file doesn't exist. So one of our environments is, another thing we can do is to come here and just copy what is here so that I don't end up typing this over and over. Now paste it here. So this is production environments. I'll change it from local to production like this. And I will save this by using Ctrl X, yes, and enter. And so once this is done, I want to create our virtual environment. So let's create our virtual environment like this. Let's say .venv/bin/activate. So we are trying to activate an environment that we have not created. So maybe we'll try to create the environment first. And so let's create a virtual environment, then we'll activate the environment. Before we do that, we can actually install, try to make sure that it understands that Python is Python 3. When we talk about Python, we mean Python 3. But we'll create the environment and then we'll see if we generate that error and then we'll correct it. So I'll say sudo Python 3 -m venv, and I want the name of my virtual environment to be .venv. Okay, so let's list and see if we have that created. So we'll have the virtual environment created. So let's activate that environment and then let's start installing our packages. We want to see how we'll use Poetry to just run the install instead of installing one package at a time. So we want to activate it /bin/activate. And so we have the environment activated. If I run Poetry install, because here we have our poetry.lock and pyproject.toml that we said manages dependencies, and all we need to put is Poetry install for this to install all of our dependencies. So if I put sudo poetry install, I'm praying we get an error so that I can show you how you correct those type of errors. Yes, we have Poetry command not found. Now we want to be able to do this. I'll say sudo apt install. Let's say Python is Python 3. Okay, we've done that, and let's try to install Poetry again. Sudo Poetry install. So command not found. So let's say Poetry install. So sudo apt install Python Poetry. So let's install that first, and then we'll do Poetry install to install all of our dependencies, and without us having to pip install SQL Alchemy, pip install Python and Flask and all of that. So this will automatically install everything that we have in our dependency file that we created. Okay, so I'll clear so that we can see, and I'll say Poetry install, and now it's installing dependencies. So markup save failed to install, permission error. So let's do sudo Poetry install, and so we have everything installing. Now when we use sudo, it just gives us administrative privileges. We are not going to go deep into that those administrative stuff, but what you see here with this warning here is that I don't have a readme file, and I have specified that in my pyproject.toml file that the readme file is needed. It's dependent on, let's look at it and see. Let me say nano pyproject.toml. So here I specified the readme is equal to readme, and because that file does not exist, we have that error, this warning here that you can see. All right. Okay. So we'll ignore that for now. We don't need it, but I'm just showing you, just in case you go into something like this, it is because you do not have a readme that you specified in that file. Does anyone have any questions?
That's it for now.
Okay, so last week we also created a WSGI file in the root of the project. If we go back to, let me go back out, and we did that in the Flask app project. We created the flaskapp.wsgi project file here, and in that file, let's see what we've written in it. We just created this code. We want to create a similar file, and in that file we want to write exactly the same code. So we'll go back to our maternity record, and then what we'll do here now is to create a file called maternityproduct.wsgi. So let me use nano. I can just do it because it's in this directory already. Okay, and then I'll paste that code here. Let me change that. So the Flask app there is going to be maternity records up there. Okay, then I'll save this, and I'm done with that one. We want to also edit our virtual host file, the file responsible for pointing this to the site. Now when we come back to our web page, we have this hello world here. It is reading from the Flask app. We don't want it to read to the Flask app. We want to get to a point where it is reading from this maternity record file, the app file, and we also want to generate and end this particular configuration with an error again. The reason why we're simulating these errors is because as a beginner, these are the errors you will have, and debugging them will become difficult. So I want us to have these errors so that we'll see what caused the error and how we can remove them. So let's try to configure the virtual host file so that we will still have an error. Let's say we want to have a forbidden error, for instance. So I'm going to go back to the flask.com file. I'll just edit that file and we'll use it, the one we used in the last lesson. So say sudo nano /etc apache2/ site available, and we have the flask.com. think this was the file we created. No, that was not the file. So we have etc Apache 2 spelling. Okay, so we configured this to port 80, and we have the server name to be our site. Now the document root, we want to change it from the flags after maternity records. And then we want to also change everywhere we see flags up, we will change it to maternity records. So I'm going to change. My environment file is not flags.env, it's .benv, so I'll change that here to maternity records. Okay. And we have this WSGI was maternity records. And this too also was maternity records. We also have the directory to the maternity records. All right, I think these are the things that we need to change so that we can point to our application. All right, so I will save this, and there's another configuration we did the last time, the Apache configuration file, where we added the WSGI script alias. So let's go there and see. I think it is in the apache.com file. So we'll say etc/apache2/apache2.com. I think this is it. No. So sudo nano. Okay, so this is the file, and at the bottom of the file we added something to point to. Is it this one? I'm wondering if it was this file. We added that too, and then the idea is to add that there so that we can point the scripts to the WSGI for the maternity records that we just created. Okay, so let me add that line there. Maybe I added it above the last time. I'm not sure where I added it, but it's supposed to be here. And so I'll add it at the bottom here. I was going to edit the last line I added in the last lesson, but I can't find it. So I'm wondering if I actually added it or not. So I'll just add that here. I'll put WSGI script alias opt/ maternity records / maternity records.wsgi. I think that should be it. WSGI script alias. I think this should be it. We'll say yes, and then I will. Okay, so we've done this, and it's time for us to see if we can get the forbidden error, and then we want to also install our MySQL server here, because we have to create our models here also. So let's run this, and I don't want to see hello world anymore. Yes, we have the internal server error, so we want to see what the error is all about. So let's go to the error log / oh no, this was not the error file. So the error file was flags_error.log. So we have the var log apache 2, and then we have flags_error.log. var log apache 2 flags error. So this is supposed to be our error log, and we can't find any error on this file. That's strange. So let's go back to the other file and see whether we have our error directory change in the virtual host. So let me put that sudo. I'll just look for it. We did that just recently. Okay, so I'll just go there. Since I can find it, I'll say sudo nano /etc/apache2/site available/lax.com. And our error file, we said flaxerror.log is what we want. So our errors are logged at flaxerror.log here. That's what I wanted to confirm. So I should be able to find that here. Okay, so now we have our errors displayed. So we have module not found error, no module name SQL Alchemy. So we've gotten to the point where we want to get to, where we don't find things anymore. Because now we have switched over to using our maternity records application, and no longer the Flax app that we created from the last lesson. So now this can find the module, and this is the effects we want to achieve in this lesson, where we change our virtual host so that it begins to read from the new directory that we have cloned, the maternity records directory. So now we have this, we have installed. Let's list there .venv. So let's cd .venv. Let's list bin. So we have our virtual environment having our flag and everything, but I don't think this has our SQL Alchemy installed here. So we'll check let's go there. Let's look at our PyProject.toml and see if we actually added that as a dependency. So we'll do sudo nano pyproject.toml file. So our dependency, we have SQL Alchemy as a dependency here. So this should actually install all of these that we have there. So we can say OS3 update and updating SQL Alchemy. We now have an error, cannot install SQL Alchemy. So this is the reason we are not finding that, because it can't install that. So why can't it install SQL Alchemy? So let's look at the error. So we have a permission denied error. Let's see if I use sudo, and now we have the SQL Alchemy installed. Okay, so we want to get a forbidden error instead of internal server error. So we still have internal server error, and let's see what is going on. Maybe it's still not reading the environment file here. So I want to go to the error log, and we want to look at what the error is. So the reason we are doing all of this to get errors is because we are going to be getting all of these errors. So no module named SQL Alchemy here. We're still having that error. So let's see what to do for us to remove the error that we are still generating. Does anybody have questions before we go further?
No question.
Okay, so let's reload. Okay, so we have tried to put the WSGI on the Apache configuration file. We have added this file. I think in the last lesson we should have done that. We've added all of that file already to so instead of the 000 default, we have pointed this to read from the new one we have collected, the apache.conf, and then we have added this to let's go back to the configuration file so that will illustrate something for you. Sudo nano /etc /apache2/apache2.com. So we've added the line for the WSGI script here. So we'll say WSGI script alias. We want it to go to the opt maternity records, and we have the maternity records.wsgi, and then we restart this. Now we can't find any module called SQL Alchemy. But before we even deal with that, we have not installed MySQL server because we need to run our models here too. So I'll deactivate and I will start that. So let's say sudo apt. Let me just answer yes to everything. Install MariaDB server. So unable to locate package MariaDB. Let's do MySQL server. MySQL secure installation. Okay. So the spelling error here. Okay. So do sudo apt auto remove, and then we will install MySQL secure installation. So we'll say sudo MySQL secure installation. My spelling error. Enter current password for root. Let's say I have no password. I just enter. I'll say no. I'll say no. I'll say yes, no, and I'll say yes, yes, and this is done. If we want to know if our installation is successful, let's try to get the MySQL shell. So I'll say sudo MySQL. The user is root, and let's say password. I have no password. I'll enter, and it has given me a shell. I can now say show databases, and I have the following normal database we always see on the schema, and I can create database, and the database we are creating is maternity records. So the database already exists. Let's show databases. We have maternity records already created. Okay, that's why. And then we want to say use maternity records, and then we can decide to say show tables, and we don't have any tables here because we have not created anything. So we can see that this is working. We have our MySQL server created. Our database maternity records is there. We want to create tables into these database maternity records. All right. So before we go further and do anything to correct all the errors that we have done, we want to create functions. We want to change our app file. Let's go to this. We'll still have our internal server error happening here, and it's because it's not finding the module. And we're going to retrace our step for this. Once we create our functions and we pull to the server, we're going to retrace our configuration to see how we got to this point. But what I want you to do is to follow the video and try to generate the same error, and take your time to look through the error very, very well, understand what that error means before you look at the solution of the error, and then try to solve the error. So I'm going to make this video available for you to get to this point, so that in the last 2 lessons that we have, your group chat will tell you the date and time for the last 2 lessons that concludes this course. We will create the functions and complete our app and pull to the server and make this available make our server available in production like this. So anyone has any question?
I'll have to go through it again before I ask the question.
Okay. All right. So this is where we end this lesson. We are going to send an announcement for the date and time of the last 2 lessons. All right. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.